Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the HOJ-Cast. This is episode 17. I'm going to try and keep this one quite a bit shorter than the recent ones. There's going to be no stories of recent pickups or information about sets or anything like that. This is just going to be some musings on the current state of the market. And in particular, the theme of this episode is navigating a bull market. And I've got a lot of different angles that I'm going to attack that from. And I'm going to apologize in advance. Something I've noticed, since I started doing this podcast, and I remember that this was also the case when I was a student too. When I'm writing an essay in a blue book for an exam, or when I was in law school, typing up a reply in the software that we used to answer those questions, or then doing long form podcasts, I really don't hit my stride until 45, 50, 60 minutes in, and I don't think I'm even going to make it that far in this episode. So that's a bit of a bummer. I tried to pace around a little bit before this episode and start kind of mumbling to myself and take a little walk to maybe get my mind up to hitting its stride. But I don't know. It's curious. I've found that in many of the episodes I've done, I really don't even say anything too worthwhile until I'm an hour in. And like I said, I remember that being the case when I was taking written tests in school too. But all right, let's get to it. The definition of a bull market, more formally, is roughly a market that's up about 20% over a small period of time, and it's accompanied by sentiment or optimism that things are going to continue to go higher. And I think we're certainly there. If I look at the Card Ladder 50 index over the last 6 months, it's up almost 20%. If I zoom out to the last year, it's up 29%. In that index, you can see the 50 cards that comprise it if you hop over here and sort of see which ones have gone up the most and down the most. So the top performing card over the last year is the 1989 Upper Deck Ken Griffey PSA 10, which Splendid Sports recently pointed out in a video of his that this card has ticked over 4,000, and so it's approaching its peak, which was around $5,200 in 2021. So you can kind of just see from the graph there that we're getting close to a card like this coming back up to its peak. And I think, given how many probably have been graded, that it might already actually even be the market cap wise. So if we look at the population growth, there were 3,900 of these in April of 2021. And there are 4,300 today. So I don't know. I'm not going to do the market cap math in my head right now. But anyway, let's just so that's the CL50, right? And so almost 20% over the last 6 months, and certainly over 20% over the last year. But if we zoom in a little bit, we can find examples that are fully in the bull territory, in the raging bull territory. So one that I have in mind is Steph Curry. Here's his index on Card Ladder. It's up 59% over the last 6 months. And then I have even more specific examples. This is actually a card that doesn't even get tracked by the index because it hasn't had one sale in the last 6 months and two in the last year. And that is the 2009 Bowman 48 Black, numbered to 48, card number 106, Steph Curry. So let me pull up a bigger image of the card here. So a BGS 9 copy of this card sold for $103,700 just a few days ago on August 9th of 2025. The prior sale of this card in that grade was $12,200 on October 28th, 2023. So in a period of less than 2 years, this card's price is multiplied by a factor of 8.5x. Certainly beyond bull. What's bigger than bull? This is in space. This is in rocket ship territory, just blasting out of the stratosphere. And something that was interesting too is that after this card logged its $103,700 sale, the next day on Fanatics Buy Now Marketplace, somebody smashed bin on the BGS 8.5 for half of that price, for $49,999. And I don't know if there are any. Oh, that card, the prior sale of the BGS 8.5 was 9 years ago for $515. From $515 to $50,000 in 9 years. So there's sort of, I just wanted to give some empirical backing to the state of the bull market right now, using the card letter 50 as the macro, and zooming in on Curry's index as a micro, and then an ultra micro point of view being this the Bowman 48 black out of 48. And I believe that's the second rarest parallel. I'm not sure if Curry has one of these. I couldn't find any sales history of it, and the checklists are a little ambiguous. But this 2009 Bowman 48, same base set, but the red parallel, the red 1 of 1. This is DeMar DeRozan's, which is numbered 1 of 1. And there are other players from that base set who have a red 1 of 1 as well. Here's Kevin Durant's red 1 of 1 from that base set. The DeRozan card is a rookie year card. The Durant is not. Here's the Larry Bird red 1 of 1 from that set. Pretty cool card. Here's the Yao Ming from that set. And this set and its parallels have this really cool, just ultra simplistic throwback design, with the cropped player and the white outline sort of silhouetting them. Anyway, so the what's interesting about that black out of 48 is that it's I don't believe it's the rarest parallel of that card even. So a card with 48 copies pushing into six-figure land, is very noteworthy. As a Steph Curry rookie, and Curry's rookie offering is pretty limited, but an 8.5x on that card in the grain of 9.5, and then that quick follow up for a card half a grade lower for 50,000 less. Anyway, I think I've proven that we have reason to believe we're in a raging bull market for Steph Curry and mostly a general bull market overall. All right, so what about those are the numerical supports. I also have some anecdotal evidence, sort of, that we're in a bull market, and I'm comparing this to what I remember 2021 and 2022 and 2020 being like. Those were definitely raging bull markets in various silos of this industry as well. And one of the things that strikes me is that in the last week, and this is probably partially residual energy from the National, in addition to evidence of a bull market, but for the first time in years, I've had people just sort of spontaneously reaching out and being like, "Hey, I want to buy this card. I just want to bounce some ideas off you, get some feedback. Do you think the price is high? Do you think the price is do you think I should pay this or not?" And there was a dormant period of years without many, if any, requests like that, and all of a sudden they've piled up over the last week. People are very excited, I think, to be buying. I think people are leery that prices are very high right now, but there's this energy. They want to discuss purchasing things and are potentially purchasing things with fellow collectors and sort of walk through their reasoning. And that's a great idea to do as a collector, to find other collectors to be sounding boards. And I'm happy to do it. But my observation just stems from the fact that I haven't had this level of energy flooding into my inbox from fellow collectors in years. So there are people, I think collectors are definitely energized to buy. And I'm not sure if that's a direct result of the bull market. Maybe it's just a coincidence that sort of collectors have they're feeling energy from the National. They're just feeling a general sentiment. I can tell you that that the months of May and June, for me personally, were maybe two of the biggest months of buying activity that I've had in a long time, maybe ever. I don't know. I would have to look. And that was a little bit before the bull market completely took off. And I don't know if it's just coincidence. I don't know if there's something bigger at play, that other people, sort of along with myself, just happened to be stumbling into cards that we really wanted, or just had an extra wave of energy, or something about the timing coming out of a prolonged, flat and bear market of 2023 and 2024. But anyway, other anecdotal signs of the bull markets: new businesses starting up. I definitely see some new businesses starting up. Some of them had been in the works for a while. Others are just sort of spontaneously arising. But there's oftentimes this enthusiasm to enter and participate in this industry as a business rather than as a collector or a dealer. I've always preferred the route of engaging with this industry at the level of the collector. I just find that the cards are the star of the show, and that businesses supporting the collecting endeavors can obviously be successful and provide a needed service. But a lot of times the businesses just seem to sort of actually be replacements or proxies for what the entrepreneur really wants to do, which is that they just really want to be involved and do stuff with cards. And if that's the case, I've just found personally that just being a collector is the most rewarding aspect of participating in this space. But anyway, so new businesses, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more if this bull market sustains for a few more months. And then also, I saw a funny comment, most likely said tongue in cheek or with some level of mirth, but the comment was on a recent card letter post, and the comment was basically replying to a card that had just sold for $24,000, and it said, "There is no top." There is no top. It's just apparently this card is going to go to $1 trillion, and even then it won't stop. So just little piece of evidence here and there that from my personal experience, that this market is frothy. It's a bull market. Now, one thing that's interesting about a bull market is that, and let me flip back my view to this bull here. One thing that's interesting about a bull market is that it creates a sense of urgency in buyers and sellers. So from the seller side, the seller recognizes that we're in a bull market, that prices are high. Seller probably recognizes that bull markets tend to be cyclical, although I'll talk a little bit more in a bit about how long maybe this bull market might last and what might actually come after it. But there's certainly a point of view for sellers who have seen appreciation, or like in the case of that Curry, an enormous appreciation in the card that they have, that maybe it's time to take money off the table, take profits. And that urgency strikes immediately. So that, it can take a little while to get a card into an auction. You have to ship it. You have to bargain for what buyer's premium will be if it's a high-end enough item. You have to argue for its placement in the auction itself. You want it to be the most prominent lot number, so on and so forth. And so there's just a process to it, and what the card has to get processed by the marketplace, and there and it's just a process. There's steps involved. And so if I decide I want to sell a card today, I mean, it can take weeks before that card is actually up and running. And then you say, well, what if the market's already cooled off? So it takes weeks to get the card into the auction, and then the auction itself might last 2-3 weeks, a month, even more than a month. And all of a sudden it's 2 months later, and what if the market's cooled off? And I didn't want to sell the card if the market had cooled off. So like there's this urgency, there's this real urgency facing sellers that look, I mean, you got to act really quick, potentially, if you want to take advantage of this market. Not saying that that's the only way to look at it, but you can certainly imagine how sellers feel that sense of urgency. Then the buyer side, there's a sense of urgency too. What if things keep going up? Or what if somebody else gobbles up this card and puts it away, and then I don't have another shot at it, and so on and so forth. So it's almost like time stops. Time is up. We've had a few years actually of accumulating periods where it just felt like time is infinite, and that there'll always be time to wait and to negotiate and to bargain, and deals can move slowly, and there's really no pressure on either side in the ordinary course. And now all of a sudden there's enormous pressure on both sides. The time is up. There's no more time to research. There's no more time to develop the collecting approach. There's no more time to philosophically introspect. It's just there's the perception in the air of urgency, and I think that serves to multiply the effect of the bull market while we're in it. And it can create anxiety and apprehension, and it's sort of almost take out some of the fun of collecting. Although I think there are others who also thrive in the chaos of the urgency too. So for some, they actually love this period quite a bit. Some remarks on how I'm navigating it. This bull market is a bit different for me than 2020, 21, 2022. During that era, I was. So let me start by just saying what's different. So during this era, I quite recently, over the last 3 months, 4 months or so, have found a new lane, a new collecting lane, a new collecting approach, a new collecting philosophy. really over the last, I guess, few years probably, but what I'm talking about in particular is a heavy emphasis on rarity and a heavy emphasis on one of one collecting, and particularly identifying one of ones that just aren't swept up into the mania that other one of ones are. If we're talking about ultra modern, so like some of the Jokic rookie year one of ones that I've added have been, from brands like Excalibur or even Totally Certified. Totally Certified is definitely up there among the more sought after brands, but it's certainly nowhere near the level of, say, like Prism or even Select or things like that. So actually, for Jokic, you could sort of categorize my Donruss one of one rookie year pickup of him, my Totally Certified one of one rookie year pickup of him, and my Excalibur rookie year one of one pickup of him. All three of those sort of fall into that bucket of outside of the mainstream brands of the Prism, Select, Immaculate, National Treasures, stuff like that. And I find that lane to be really exciting and really rewarding. And that's sort of an approach that downplays a little bit brand premium, but really rather than downplaying brand premium, it just sort of emphasizes the existence of products that just aren't ordinarily popping up in the safe searches of the average hobbyist. But these cards, I think, have very compelling stories that back them as well. And then also that philosophy has been imported into my Michael Jordan collecting. That was a bit more recently, but having landed on the first set from Upper Deck to offer one of ones as part of its base offering, that would be the 1998-99 Upper Deck, the 98-99 Upper Deck Gold one of one base set card. That's the first ever basketball base set one of one from Upper Deck. So I find that to be a very compelling product. I found that to be a compelling story. The Michael Jordan cards from that particular product, whether it's Series 1 or Series 2, I mean, they in my experience, in my perspective, they're quite cheap. And so in either of those lanes, I've found, from the way that I value things, from what I like as a collector, I found that even today, those types of cards, I find them to be undervalued relative to the price of other pre-bull market cards. And I still like the mainstream cards too that I'm referring to, the Prism Black one of one stuff, the PMGs, the Star Rubies. I still love those cards too. Still have them in my collection as well. And those are the ones that are running, in addition to other cards that are running during this bull market. But I've sort of, this bull market, navigating this bull market for me has been quite straightforward, quite stress-free, because the stuff that I'm focusing on, I don't really think the bull market has had much of an impact on it at all, first of all. And then second of all, I think even if the bull market was impacting it, the prices that I've been collecting this stuff at over the last few months, I still find them to be very appetizing compared to what more mainstream stuff was selling pre-bull market, let alone however much some of this stuff has gone up now. Some of this stuff hasn't realized sales yet since the bull market. So rather than pinpoint an example, I'm just speaking generally, but that's sort of how I've been navigating it. And that's dumb luck. That's blind luck that I was able to stumble into a couple different categories, different types of cards for different players that sort of exist outside of the bull market rush right now. And that's really eased any pressure that I might feel on the buyer side. Now on the seller side, I do feel some pressure to send a thing or two into auction, just because I've sort of found this lane that I find a ton of value in as a collector. And I found this lane, and if I could, take some cash off the table on a card or two that's really probably had a big boost during this bull market, and then redeploy it into, the category of cards I'm really enjoying collecting right now, I might really be able to maximize the purchasing power of that dollar. But I also I sort of dread the process, and I really don't want to sell anything. I never want to sell anything, especially my biggest and best cards. So I definitely feel that urgency, that pressure on myself as a seller to maybe let one or two things go or something like that. But I'm able to navigate. And what's the worst that happens? I just don't sell the stuff and I get to keep my cards. There's not much downside there to me as a collector. So I really, that's how I've been navigating it. And the other thing that I really like to use this time, so first of all, like I really don't enjoy the social media experience all that much during a bull market. There's a lot of back patting and self congratulation, and I get it. I get the sentiments, and I get why people feel that way. But I've seen this cycle multiple times. Seen, people are excited. I get it. I'm happy for them. But by the same token, it's not really the content that I want to consume. I'm just not, somebody sharing a post and it says like, look, how much is my card worth now? It's just, that's not my type of content. I get why people rally around it. I get why people like it. I get why people want to show off what they own. I get all that stuff, but it's just not content for me. So I've sort of been really tuned out of social media to a large extent lately, except for those content creators and collectors who are sort of still churning out posts and thoughts and ideas that resonate with me. I'll still seek that stuff out and look at it. But I'm sort of replacing that time or using that time to actually do the counterintuitive thing, or to do the thing that bucks the trend. Like there's such a pressure, there's such an urgency during a bull market, whether it's to sell or to buy. And I sort of see this time frame, I sort of see this period as a time to just completely unplug from that and dive deeper into thinking about collecting, dive deeper into developing collecting approaches, into identifying cards and sets of interests that are just not visible, and not even making moves on them, but just sort of, while it feels like this is a very time intensive moment, that the time is up, so to speak, time to make moves and do stuff now, and pressure. I go the opposite. I go the complete opposite direction. I say I'm happy to relax right now. I just had a big flurry of collecting activity over the last few months, really over the last few years, and I find that as a collector, and just for the purpose of thinking in general, that particularly the exercise of writing things down, writing ideas down. This is where AI models are excellent too, sort of feeding ideas into AI models and going back and forth with them. That writing thoughts structures them, and structuring thoughts leads to sharper reasoning. And writing is just such an amazing tool actually for the human brain, because I don't know, how many active thoughts can I sort of keep in my head right now and then build on top of them and reply to them and circle back to them and so forth. It's not that many, but when I'm writing, I can build thought on top of thought on top of thought, and I can revisit those thoughts without having to hold them present in my mind. I can file them away. I don't need to have access to them immediately, because I can go back and see what I wrote, and I iterate on what I wrote, and then I take what I wrote and I break it into more of a formal logic, and make sure that there are no smuggled in premises and stuff. And it's just, and so going back and forth with AI, writing down thoughts, writing down ideas, this is a great time to do that for me. Even though there's a lot of pressure, it feels like the opposite should be happening. This feels not like the time to be on the sidelines. This feels like the end of the fourth quarter of a playoff game. That's sort of the energy that I sense in a bull market. But I don't think this is the end of the fourth quarter of a playoff game. I don't think that's what a bull market is at all. That's not how I engage with it anyway. Now, with that said, I always offer up the caveat that I may espouse an entire line of thoughts and justify them and reason through them, and then, if a grail card of mine suddenly comes up for auction at Golden, and I run wild bidding on it, don't be surprised by that either, because that's the other thing about bull markets, is that sometimes they yield cards that just you won't see in any other time, and then the tough decisions have to be made. So the final thing that I'm doing in this bull market is, I'm enjoying the collection that I've built, and I'll look at a particular card, like I pulled out of the PC box the other day the 2019 Select Courtside Black 1/1 Jokic card I've had for, I don't know, a few years probably now. And it just shines a little bit brighter in a bull market when the energy is high, when collector sentiment is strong, when prices are up, and just sort of knowing that in the back of one's mind. There's just something about cards that they shine a little bit brighter in a bull market. And I enjoy looking at my cards and in my collection. I enjoy always looking at them, but there is an extra twinkle, an extra sparkle to them during a bull market. All right, so there's some ideas. There's some almost some of my personal self-imposed prescriptions for sort of how I'm approaching things and things that I'm feeling, things that I'm observing, things that I'm noticing. But I also have questions about a bull market. I just would rather sort of kick a few questions into, inject a few questions into this discussion, and not necessarily say that I have the answer, but just that these are questions that occur to me. One of the questions I have is how much of this is genuine price appreciation, and how much of this is the devaluation of the dollar, and sort of casting an eye upon the S&P 500 or the price of various cryptocurrencies, real estate prices, which interestingly, real estate prices seem to have flatlined recently, or even are coming down in some areas. But I look at these different categories that are measured in the dollar bill or in US dollars as well. And it occurs to me that, you know, how much of this effect is representing the loss of value, that the loss of purchasing power that the US dollar has. But it would certainly need to be above and beyond core inflation as measured by the U.S. government, because that number is nowhere near an 8.5, like the 8.5x of that Steph Curry card saw over the last 2 years. I think Curry is an outlier, Curry as a total index is an outlier, and that particular Curry card is an outlier. But even still, the dollar, like looking at something very conservative like the CL50, the dollar hasn't lost 30% of its value per inflation metrics over the last year, not even close to that. But so I do wonder about that. I wonder if this market actually is shedding some insight into what a bad position of purchasing power the US dollar has, even above and beyond what inflation numbers say. Another thing I think about is, so I sort of alluded before to, I feel a bit of a pressure as a seller, and that I do see an opportunity as a seller, if I were to sell a card or two, that I have these categories of cards that just are not mainstream, and but that I'm very excited about. And as I add cards from these particular categories, some of them instantly become some of my favorite cards in my collection. And so, since those are not quite as susceptible to the bull market, or at least this iteration of it, that I might actually be able to magnify the power of my dollars by taking them out of something that's really really heated up in this bull market, and put them into something that isn't. But the other risk, though, is that, well, what if my assessment is wrong? What if the stuff that I'm actually buying, first of all, what if it's not as undervalued as I think it is? Second of all, what if it actually is going up in the bull market just as all the other stuff is? Or third of all, what if I come across a card that isn't in this like sort of niche one of one area that I'm looking at, but so it is like more of a mainstream card that is susceptible to the bull market, but it's one that I've been looking for. It's one that I really want. So what if that happens, and then I end up cashing out of one card that's benefited from the bull market, just to recycle the dollars into a different card that's also inflated in the bull market. So in that way, the purchasing power of the dollar isn't really gaining anything. Or what if I sell into this bull market, and then the bull market continues to go up, and then I've just turned a card that could have gone up even further, I've just turned that into cash that buys even less than it did when I sold the card, right? So like if the bull market ticks up another 20%, it's like I sell now and then the bull market ticks up another 20%, I've just turned my card into deflating cash, because the cash's purchasing power has gone down by 20%. So that's a thought that I have as well. Is just sort of the risk of selling is that just having cash just sort of sit there, that can be not wise. But on the other hand, you can end up timing it quite well. What if we're at the tail end of this bull run, and sneaking in a sale before there's a correction? That could be another way to maximize dollars. So these are tough decisions that happen, in the mind of a collector, I think. But practicality sort of factors in too, and just sort of the joy of collecting really makes cards sticky. It really keeps cards in collections. But I do think about that. That's an open question. Is it how would selling work in this environment? Okay, the next question I have is, how long will this bull market last? So is this just a blip, and there's a correction due soon? Is this bull market the byproduct of just a few new big buyers coming in and deploying several $1 million each, and it sort of pumps up these outlier auction results in a handful of auctions, and then sort of things calm down. I mean, there also are aggregate figures like the month of July was the highest month on the card layers industry tab for sales of all the different cars we track. It's the highest month we've ever tracked, but as Josh has pointed out, some of that is definitely due to Pokemon, and because we are tracking Pokemon in card layers industry tab too. So it's a little bit unclear. It's in other words, it's very possible that the composition of the aggregate sales volumes on the monthly level, say for the month of July, is that there's a lot of Pokemon happening that sort of drove up that volume, and then that was complemented by a handful of outlier results and auctions from a handful of bigger buyers coming into the sports card space, or just an extra level of enthusiasm for a handful of cards, or for a specific player like Curry, or another player like Messi, whose market is really up right now, certainly in raging bull territory. And that sort of these are just two factors, and once that capital is done being deployed, or that this isn't systemic, this isn't widespread, but that these are just a handful of outlier situations, and that they'll ultimately just end up being outliers, and that it presents the idea of a bull market sort of looks like a bull market on the surface, but if we actually scroll back, well, the CL50 is really only up 19% in the last 6 months, almost bull market territory, but the weakest bull market by its formal conception. And then we just have a few outlier players, a few silos that are particularly energized. So it's so that there's a hypothesis that or a set of reasoning to support the fact that this might just be a blip. This might be brief. On the other hand, this could be long lasting. In short order, the NBA license will be transferring over to Fanatics. And we've seen that Fanatics takes its marketing efforts and its recruitment efforts more seriously than any hobby company has, I think, over the lifetime of me being back in the hobby since 2016. So, and I'll, as an example, I'll just give the way that they utilized Tom Brady, the way that they had LeBron James show up at Fanatics Fest in New York a few months ago. I mean, that's one of the hardest gets possible. Where do you go from there? You get Michael Jordan, like that's it. Then you've climbed the mountain in terms of the difficulty of celebrity athletes. And at that point, when you're talking about the Michael Jordan tier, you're talking about literally historical figures. LeBron James, these are historical figures. These are people that are bigger than sport, that are bigger than athletics. They're at the top of pop culture impact historically, matching most influential people ever. These are the people that Fanatics ostensibly, I mean, LeBron and maybe one day Jordan, that these are the people that Fanatics is getting involved and coming to its events. And the marketing spend is enormous. The event that they're putting on, the way that they had, and they brought some support even to reinforce the national to some degree. The outlay of resources, I think it's going to increase. I think that's a reasonable guess that the marketing and the recruitment outlays are only going to increase once Fanatics takes over the NBA license, which I believe that's supposed to be October of this year. And then the NFL license is spring of next year, maybe like April or May or something of next year, something like that. And the interesting thing about that is, domestic people who work on sports cards, the NFL is the sport of the era. The NFL is producing Super Bowls that are getting hundreds of millions of viewers. Game 7 of the NBA Finals of an incredible NBA Finals, I think it peaked at like 18 million viewers or something like that. It had an average viewership of maybe 16 million. We're just talking about scalar differences, orders of magnitude differences in popularity, or at least in terms of viewership, between the NFL versus the NBA and the MLB. So domestically, I think the NFL is the product that everybody's the most excited about, or at least it would be reasonable to assume that Fanatics and the people who work there and the people who are have a vested interest in its well-being, and from Tom Brady sort of being the most prominent and the most significant figure that is performing marketing services and integrating into Fanatics plans within the sports car collecting hobby. I think it only it only stands to reason that the peak of their efforts probably won't even begin until they have the NFL license too, since that's when their reach is going to be multiplied by the largest factor. In other words, they'll be able to reach the most casual fans and have recruitment happen at the furthest reaching level once they tap into the NFL fan base, or at least that's a set of thoughts. So there's a different point of view that says, well, maybe this bull market is preceding an even larger one that will be kicked off over the next few months, few years, as Fanatics takes over the NBA and the NFL licenses, specifically the NFL. So I don't know. I'm asking the question. I don't know. And then a corollary is, how bad will the correction be when it inevitably happens? Will it just kind of tail off a little bit, or will it be bloodshed like what happened after the 2021-2022 bull run, where markets got cut in half? I mean, the CL50 index, even having gone up 20% over the last 6 months, even having gone up 30% over the last year, it's not even back to 50% of what it was at its peak. As the classic example, to give you a particular card, the 1986-87 Fleer basketball card number 57, Michael Jordan. That card in a PSA 9 got upwards of $80,000 to $90,000 during early 2021, and now it's at $20,000 to $25,000. I mean, these are the types of corrections. I mean, correction isn't a strong enough word. These are the crashes that happened in the wake of that bull market. So that's also is a question: is what will the correction look like? How does the debasement of the U.S. dollar relate to that? How does the competition of other quote unquote asset classes, once cards get frothy enough and people take money off the table, will there be an exodus into other things? And then we sort of go through another big peak and valley cycle. So, all right. And then a few concluding thoughts here. What are the advantages of a bear market? So I ran a poll on Instagram where I asked people, which market environment do you prefer? The bear market of 2023 to 2024. I sort of put the year there as an example of a bear market, or bull market, which then I gave examples of 2021 through 2022 and 2025. And the result was after this 24-hour poll ran its course, there was around 350 responses. 58% said bear market. They prefer the environment of a bear market, and 42% say they prefer the environment of a bull market. And so the advantages of the bear market are that there's far less self-congratulatory energy. Far less people patting themselves on the back for how much their cards have gone up. And at the level of the day-to-day socializing that happens in the hobby, which I think is a really important part of this hobby, important part of the day-to-day of it all, like that we don't have to scroll through, let's say, stories or posts on various social media platforms and sort of see people saying, how much is mine worth now? And oh man, this is so great. I think generally people would really like to avoid that. So the bear market doesn't have that. The bear market has much more cautious, neutral, restrained commentary, and from hobby participants, I think people prefer that. Also in the bear market, cards are just cheaper, and and there isn't the pressure, the urgency. It just doesn't seem to exist. So during those times, you can improve your collection at a much cheaper cost, and you don't have this time's up feeling. It doesn't feel like the hourglass is completely, all the sand has fallen to the bottom of the hourglass. There's a lot to like about a bear market. Bear market is just calmer. People's energy is more even. the bear market, I think a lot of people quietly are longing for it. And people who voted bull market, some of them would reply to the poll and they just can't. They would like, how in the world is bear market winning this poll? And I think I gave a few examples of how. Right there, there are some social dimensions that are preferable in the bear market, and then also cards are cheaper, and a lot of people just want to make their collection better at the lowest price possible. But some of the advocates of the bull market would sort of say, well, look, in order for any of this to really make financial sense, there needs to be a bull market from time to time. And also just sort of from a sentiment point of view, it doesn't make sense for a market, even a collectibles market. It's just there's something contradictory about a market constantly being bearish. that a constant pessimism is almost incompatible with a joy and an enthusiasm and a passion for collecting, and that eventually those things are going to point bullish, at least for a little while, until people get their fill, and then they sort of realize or calculate that actually their goals are better served in a more sterile environment, in a calmer environment, rather than one that's really amped up like a bull market. But so it was sort of pointed out to me that, like, well, we need a bull market every once in a while for various reasons, whether it's for people to sort of get the rush of it, and sort of for it to be a manifestation of collecting enthusiasm that's unavoidable, or just to have cash out opportunities to make money off of cards, and then to put that money into other cards, or even take it out of the hobby and put it into other things, and to have had a successful venture from a financial point of view, from a speculative point of view in collecting. And also, people just, I think there's a general association of a bull market being a positive thing, being a good thing. Hey, it's a bull market. Prices are going up. People are happy. People want to spend more money on cards. People are getting more aggressive about buying cards, and they're more passionately pursuing the stuff that they want to buy. And everybody who owns cards, the prices of their collections are going up. Like, this is good. And because, like, in the context of the stock market, a bull market is generally seen as a good thing, and a bear market is a bad one. But people aren't collecting stocks. People are buying stocks for the specific reason of seeing them increase in value. The same thing in real estate too. It's like, real estate's more of a mixed bag. There are plenty more people who are hoping for bear markets in real estate because they want to buy awesome houses or condos or whatever, and they want to be able to buy them at the lowest price because they want to live in it. They want to enjoy it. So I think there's more of an appetite, more of a sense for people with the real estate background, that bear markets offer quite a bit too, even though bear markets are harmful to people who work in that space, real estate agents, people who work on the mortgage side of things. So, but yeah, there's just this idea that a bull market is just this indisputably positive thing, and it's not. I think the poll result sort of helps show that, and I've given a few reasons why. I'm sure there are more reasons why people like bear markets that I haven't given as well. So, all right, I want to give one last thought here. I did a lot of talking about the market and stuff here, and prices and value of the dollar, and should you sell, and what's undervalued and stuff like that. And like, I don't love talking about that stuff. It is a part of my calculus. It is a part of my day-to-day. But the thing that gets my collector brain going, the thing that I really love, is actually talking about collecting philosophies. And so I actually found sort of a topic that dovetails with a point that I made earlier, and this will be my final segment. And it's sort of about how quickly the hobby changes its mind, or rather how slowly it changes its mind, and sort of what the mechanisms are, what exactly is needed to move the mountain of sentiment in this arena. And I'm thinking about it particularly from the point of view of the fact that I feel like I've discovered several collecting lanes over the last few years that just are not in the mainstream. And so one wonders, if you're in the position as me, are we on an island, or are we just in a or are we on an island that will never get domesticated, and we'll always have the island to ourselves, or will more people come to it? And so one of the things I was thinking about, and I think this is just generally applicable to anybody who sort of steps out of the mainstream and goes into a different lane. and carefully reasons through it, and really and that lane is both naturally occurring to them as a byproduct of all their different ruminations on collecting, but also that they've thought deeply about it, and they've weighed various approaches, and that they've rationally concluded, in addition to the emotional sentimental conclusion, that this is an area of cards that makes sense, that lines up with their collecting preferences, and that gets them really excited. And so will there ever be a time when sentiment will shift or follow up? And I think the first answer is that it very rarely happens. It very rarely happens. It can happen, but the normal hierarchy or relationship between cards, it tends to be established by price results, and price results tend to be pretty predictive of future price results. So in other words, it can be pretty difficult to break the hierarchy, the relationship, the price relationship that various cards have to each other. But it does happen. But when it does happen, and this is the key point, when it does happen, it happens slowly. And I'll give an example that I can think of in my own mind about a topic that I am dispassionate about, that I'm neutral about. I do not collect the cards that I'm about to discuss, and I probably won't ever. But I've observed it. I do think about it. It pertains to my favorite player of all time, Michael Jordan. And so the cards that I've seen sentiment change with respect to are the 1986-87 Fleer 57 Michael Jordan, and the 1984-85 Star 101 Michael Jordan. Now, I think there's a lot still to be unraveled in terms of understanding these cards, in particular the full breadth of the 1984-85 Star offering, and the different MJ cards that are in that particular checklist, but also in checklists of other Star offerings circa 84, 85, 86, that there's a lot there, that there's more cards than you might think. But I'm not going to do a deep dive into that right now. What I am going to do a dive into is the competing points of view as to whether the Fleer of 86 or the Star 101 of 84, which one of those is the rookie, or however one defines rookie. And so I actually want to step back from that, because I don't want to get into the semantics of defining rookie. Not today. I find that to be an incredibly interesting topic, but I'm not interested in defining that today. What I'm more interested in discussing is simply the first layer of the discussion that leads into defining rookie, which is, are each of these cards equally legitimate? Are each of them equally sports cards? And one of the arguments that sort of suggests that the 84-85 Star 101 isn't quite as legitimate is the fact that it didn't come from a blind pack. And it seems that, so first of all, that distinction still exists. It didn't come from a blind pack then, and it doesn't come from a blind pack now, and it never will have come from a blind pack. But the emphasis that people place on that variable as they analyze cards, that is susceptible to change. Sentiment around that is susceptible to change. And so as people say, okay, that is true. It is true that the 86-87 Fleer, that it comes from a blind pack, and that at least on some level that resonates more with hobby tradition. But I'm sure people could point out counterexamples that there are important traditional hobby cards that didn't come from blind packs. But that's not really the point. The point is that is, when we compare the two, that is a property that the 86-87 Fleer has that the 84-85 Star does not have. However, there has been a raising awareness or visibility of other factors that the 84-85 Star has that the 86-87 Fleer doesn't, namely that the 84-85 Star has a production year and an associated season of 84-85, which happens to be Michael Jordan's debut rookie season in the NBA. So that is a variable in favor of the 84-85 Star that the 86-87 Fleer cannot claim. Now, in response to that, the 86-87 Fleer can say, but this is Michael Jordan's first Fleer card, and the brand of Fleer is important and bigger and more all-encompassing, and has a much larger premium associated with it than the brand of Star, which is also true. And that Fleer is much longer running, and the fruits of Fleer's IP can still be seen in releases today, and it was so much more prominent in the 90s, and that it's an end in the 80s and across other sports, and just that the 86 87 Fleer has a significant brand premium over the Star, which it does. But the Star can come back and say that it's a jersey color match, and so there's these different variables that mitigate in different ways. And the point that I want to make is that the discussion, and I think that this was only possible in the age of the internet, but the discussion matured to the level where we can actually analyze and consider side by side the Star versus the Fleer because of the democratizing nature of access to price information, access to images of cards, access to discussion groups, and so forth, that we just didn't have 10 years ago, certainly not 20 years ago, certainly not 30 years ago. And although this sort of flattening of the playing field that has allowed sort of obscure brands like Star to, I hope nobody takes offense that I've called it obscure, but it's certainly not of the visibility of Fleer or Prism or Bowman or Topps or whatever. But it certainly is gaining in esteem, thanks largely in part to having Michael Jordan's 84-85 card, and the Star 101 being the first appearing in that base set. So the Star 101 having the claim to being the first Michael Jordan in a Bulls uniform sports card and to have been associated with his professional debut and to be associated with his rookie season. But once these, so there wasn't always even really like the intellectual permission, or it seemed out of step to sort of compare these two to each other at all. But now the means of comparison, or the permission to compare, seems to be there. And once that permission was granted, the 84 Star began to gain steam, and some of the things that then count in its favor as it continues. As it becomes the topic of conversation, as it becomes something that is allowed to be compared to the 86 Fleer, well, then at that point, you start looking at population reports, and you start looking at or in other words, rarity, and chronology, and brand premium, and methods of distribution, and licensing. I mean, one of the more interesting defenses of the 86 Fleer, sort of as Michael Jordan's true rookie, and again, I'm not trying to go into the definition of rookie, is that it was fully licensed. The licensing deal that was struck between Fleer and the NBA and the NBPA, presumably, was more robust than any sort of licensing deal that was struck with a smaller, sort of regional manufacturer such as Star. But anyway, the bigger point that I wanted to make is that through the eyes of the medium of the internet, that these cards have been able to be compared as equals, or as presumptive equals, waiting for one to make a knockout blow argument to the other, and really there isn't. Really, what it boils down to is that one is Michael Jordan's first Star card, first appearing in the base set, and there are two other Jordan cards in that 80-45 Star base set that come later, and then there is the Michael Jordan's first ever Fleer card. That each is a first of a different stripe. And I think even though the 86-87 wasn't produced in association with Michael Jordan's NBA rookie season, but in fact in association with his third season, that's the prestige of the first Fleer. To make an analogy that's timely, or topical, ultra modern, it's similar to 2012 Prism being the debut of certain players whose rookie season was in 2012. Maybe like Steph Curry, who we were talking about earlier. His rookie season cards are 2009-10, but Prism didn't come out until 2012-13. So you have Curry's first Prism card, and Curry's first Prism Gold is a very valuable card. So, there's sort of, so I'll analogize that back, like Curry's first Prism Gold or something, or first Prism. That's sort of similar to Michael Jordan's first Fleer. His first Fleer card. So there's lots of different avenues and angles to attack it, but the bigger picture is that the star was initially, even as much as a year ago, I was still of the mindset that there really isn't grounds to discuss the 84 star and the 86 Fleer together. You do have sort of the blind pack thing that kind of ends the discussion. It's sort of a threshold question. And if a card doesn't come from a blind pack, then it's of a different category. It doesn't get to enter. But eventually, over time, and through talking with and arguing with collectors and just discussing it, it becomes clear that blind pack is a variable, but it doesn't need to be a threshold question. It's a variable. And that, in fact, advocates for the star say the real threshold question is, was the card issued in association with the player's rookie season? Because if it's not, then it's difficult to mount an argument that some other card can be a rookie when there is a card that is associated with the rookie season that was issued too. So it took time. That's what I'm trying to. That's what I ultimately want to say is that consideration for the different points of view, a disruption of the status quo, thinking critically, thinking carefully, being willing to re-examine core assumptions. It happens. It happened to me. You can see that it's happened on a market-wide level, but it takes time. It moves very slowly, and that's such a contrast to what the market feels like in a bull market. In a bull market, it feels like time is up. It feels like the sense of immediacy is ever present. But the way that market sentiment changes is quite the opposite. It's at a glacial pace. It's slow. It's careful. It zigs and zags, and it comes with a lot of introspection and reviewing of things. And then all of a sudden, after time and discussions and iterations of market cycles, and eventually, the mind softens a bit in its stance. But it takes time. It really takes contemplation. It takes thought. It takes review. It takes time for sentiment to change. And I offer up as the example my sentiment towards the 84 star, where it was only through like the erosion on the shoreline of the great state of Michigan that it took wave after wave after wave crashing into the shore before my defenses were worn down, and I came to think about various ways of comparing the 84 star and the 86 Fleer, and that they are eligible for comparison. That was sort of the barrier that needed to be broken, because once that barrier does break, once one card is allowed to come in to the vision, once a card is allowed to enter the stage, to join the other cards on the same stage and to be analyzed next to them, and for all of its properties to be compared to the properties of the other. Once that is allowed, once that permission is granted, once a card is made visible, really surprising things can happen. The power of rational comparison, it moves very slowly, but it does move, and I think it does. It can happen, but it's slow. It's very slow. And it happens at the level of reflection over time. All right, we're gonna cut this short of an hour. Went into this thinking it might only be 30 minutes. So thank you for listening. Chris HOJ-Cast number 17. See you guys on the crossover tomorrow night, and then for, I don't know, maybe the next HOJ-Cast.